I just want to make sure I'm not the only one in the room that this is true of, so work with me a little bit. How many of you have ever made a stupid decision? Anybody made a bad choice? Okay, good. I want to make sure I'm not the only one, that way I know that I'm talking to my type of people. There was one time, probably about 15 years ago, I was at work one day, and I got this idea that right after work I was going to rush to a car dealership and trade in the brand new car that I'd only had for a couple months for a cheaper car if they could get me any payment that was lower than what I had. So I show up, just imagine, there are great car salesmen out there. And then there are those that a sucker is born every minute, right? I walk in, just imagine being in this situation. I said, here's the deal, guy. I don't care what the car is. I just want a lower payment. I've only had this for a couple months. Do you have anything that will work? He goes, oh, I've got stuff that'll work. Now, you know how long it normally takes to go through a financing process and the choosing of a car and all of that. I was in and out of the car dealership in less than 45 minutes. I did not get in the car. I did not test drive the car. I saw it from a distance. It's that one right there, the silver one. Great. It's got 4 wheels, 4 doors. Let's do it. Sign all the paperwork. I get in that car, and I realize I have made an unbelievable mistake. Everything in this car that used to be powered is now no longer power. Everything that was nice about the other car, it's gone. It's a disaster. But I have now signed on the line to save $30 a month. Signed up 7 years, yep, we'll drive this piece of crap to save $30 a month. It was a horrible decision. See, because quick decisions a lot of times end up being really horrible decisions. And we've all been there. We've all done it. Like, you ever notice as a child, the only decisions that you really have to make as a child are choices that are put before you, for the most part, when you're little, they're all fun decisions to make. How am I going to spend my time? What kind of ice cream am I going to have? What popsicle flavor am I going with? Like, they're fun decisions. And as something happens around like 16, 17, 18, the fun decisions for the most part are gone, and then they're just like adult life decisions. Hey, where are you going to go to school? What are you going to major in? What are you going to do with your life? Who are you going to spend the rest of your life with? How many kids are you going to have? How are you going to educate your kids? What are you going to let them have tablets or no tablets? Where are you going to buy a house? Where are you going to live? What state? Are you going to have this job? What about if you get a new job offer? It's just decision after decision after decision. And they're all like really critical. And so if that's the case, if that's what life ends up being like for all of us, that we're just faced with just a cycle of decisions over and over that we have to make, we need to make sure that we have a plan to make wise decisions. That we have a way to actually make sure that we get the best decisions made. Because I'm going to tell you, you may not admit this, but I think I know how most Christians make decisions. You can tell me if I'm wrong on this, but I think most people, because I've been there, most Christians, when we say we're going to pray about a decision, what we're actually doing is asking God to bless the decision we have already made. We've already decided what we're doing because, look, I can tell it's the right decision. And so I'm just going to ask God if He will bless what I've already said yes to. Whether it's what He wants or not, God, listen, it just makes sense. It makes the most sense to me. That's what I'm going with. So God, if you wouldn't mind, would you just bless my decision? Whether it's actually what He wants or not. Today, I want to show you in 1 Samuel 16, we're continuing our series. I want to show you that Samuel is being put in a situation where he is to anoint the new king of Israel. We saw for the last 2 weeks, the king Saul, he has been rejected by God because of his unfaithfulness to God. And now it will be Samuel's job to choose, to anoint the new king. To make the right decision, he needs the guy that God has chosen. He's going to have to fight against all the external things, everything inside of him to make sure he makes the right decision and hears from the Lord. 1 Samuel 16, beginning of verse 1 says this, "Now the Lord said to Samuel, you have mourned long enough for Saul. I have rejected him as king of Israel, so fill your flask with olive oil and go to Bethlehem and find a man named Jessie who lives there, for I have selected one of his sons to be my king." So God speaks to the prophet Samuel, says, listen, I want you to go to Bethlehem, find a man named Jessie. One of his sons will be the next anointed king of Israel. Now this is very interesting because you and I, living in 2024, we've been through enough Christmases to know that Bethlehem is a big city that we need to know in the Bible. But in this time period, to say that the next king was going to come from some backwater town like Bethlehem, some no-name little tiny town of Bethlehem, this is remarkable. And it's going to come through the tribe of Judah? That's not where Saul came from. Like, God is doing something so new here. And it's clear in the text that God is the one choosing this king. He's finding the man that he has destined for this position. It goes on. Samuel asked, how can I do that? If Saul hears about it, he'll kill me. He goes, listen, just last chapter, y'all, I just told Saul he was going to have the kingdom ripped from him. He's pretty salty with me right now. And if he hears I'm running around town anointing new kings, he's still the king. He's going to come after me. This is going to cause problems for me. He goes, he'll kill me. The Lord says, take a heifer with you and say that you've come to make a sacrifice to the Lord. Invite Jessie to the sacrifice, and I will show you which one of his sons to anoint. So Samuel did as the Lord instructed. When he arrived at Bethlehem, the elders of the town came out trembling to meet him. What's wrong, they asked. Do you come in peace? See, they were nervous. The prophet shows up, and they're like, oh my goodness, what is going on? Has someone done something wrong? The prophet's here on business. What is happening? Now, I want to just pause for a second and think about the situation that Samuel finds himself in. The king is already mad at him because he's the one that delivered the news. And now he has to go and anoint the new king, and he's worried. Here's what I want to tell each and every one of you in here, that if you're faithful to the Lord, you want to be faithful to the Lord, he's going to call you to some stuff, and here's the deal. It's not always going to be very easy. It's not. In fact, most of the stuff that God calls us to is not easy stuff. It's not like sometimes it will cost you. Sometimes there will be consequences. Sometimes people will go against you. Sometimes people will say bad stuff about you. When you're trying to be faithful to God, it's not going to be easy. That's what Samuel was finding out. He goes, man, this must have been where they got that phrase, don't kill the messenger. Right, God, you're putting me in a pretty tough situation here. And he goes, yeah, that's kind of what God does. That's kind of what God does. Because he's going to call you and ask you to do things that's not always going to be easy. But here's the question that we have to answer. Do you trust him enough to say yes? No matter what it is. There's going to be some really difficult things he might bring up in your life. Some changes that need to be made. Some decisions that need to be made. Do you trust him enough to say yes, no matter what it costs you? Verse 5 says this, yes, Samuel replied, I have come to sacrifice to the Lord. Purify yourselves and come with me to the sacrifice. And then Samuel performed the purification rite for Jessie and his sons and invited them to the sacrifice too. And when they arrived, Samuel took one look at Eliab and thought, surely this is the Lord's anointed. So Samuel has a job to do. He's finding the new king of Israel. And he gets everyone to this sacrifice. Jessie brings his sons, and he sees one of them named Eliab. And he's got this look about him, apparently, because the text says, as soon as Samuel saw him, he goes, that must be the one. On paper, Eliab he's the guy. Everyone looks at him and goes, ooh, he looks like a king. He's got those kingly features, like he just looks like a leader. On the outside, That's what he looks like. And can I be honest, when it comes to making decisions, this is how a lot of us, this is as deep as we ever get, is what it looks like on the outside. Right? Somebody asks you, do you want to take a new job? Here's our first question. What's the pay? How much does it pay? How much freedom do I get? Who's my boss? I just want all the superficial things to make the decision. But there's a whole lot more to it, right? There's a whole lot more to it, but we normally just do that. Like if we're trying to choose who are we going to date, who are we going to spend our lives with? Well, what do they look like? How crazy are they? Come on. Right? Like we just want to know just a little bit of information before we make choices like that. And it might be like conventional wisdom looks at Eliab and goes, that's the guy. Samuel's going, surely, God, this is your guy. Look at him. Everything on the outside is screaming, this is the king. And then God steps in and speaks to Samuel. He says, don't judge by his appearance or his height. Now listen, that's the word of the Lord. You know what I'm saying? Don't judge. Thank you. Don't judge me by my height. That's not fair. The Lord made me like this. He says, don't judge by his appearance or his height, for I've rejected him. Oh, the one that everything on the outside looks good. Yes, I've rejected him. The Lord doesn't see things the way you see them. People judge by outward appearance, but the Lord looks at the heart. What's he saying? When God makes decisions, he is operating at a level and with information that you do not have. He has more information about the situation. So he's not just looking at the car going, is the payment cheaper? Great, I'll take that. He's not just looking at the situation going, is the pay higher? Is the neighborhood nicer? Is the house better? He's not just looking at the outside. He has more information available to him, so he makes choices differently. He's not superficial like us. Southridge Church used to have a basketball night. Every Monday night, we used to go down to Davis Creek Church of the Nazarene, and a bunch of guys. I mean, there'd be 15, 20, 25 guys some nights. We would go down. I was in charge of the basketball night. I had the key, so I had to be there. But I had showed up at work that day and totally forgot about basketball night. And I was trying to figure out, I didn't have time to drive home and get my basketball shoes and shirt and shorts and all of this stuff. So I didn't know what I was going to do. I came up with the idea, I'll go to Kohl's and see if I could find something. The other problem was I was dead broke. So I'm at Kohl's and I'm trying to find an outfit to go play basketball in. I don't have my Nikes on me or nothing. I'm wearing some dad New Balances that day. Okay, like just your run-of-the-mill tennis shoes. They're not basketball shoes. I mean, they're clearly not meant for a court. So I go to Kohl's. I find a pair of basketball shorts. They're not Nikes, I'll tell you that much. I don't know what they are. I don't even think I still have them. And the only T-shirt I could afford in the whole building that I saw, I mean, I'm trying to do this fast. It's a T-shirt, and it's got Mario and Luigi and all their friends on it. So I'm wearing these shorts, some dad New Balances, and a Mario T-shirt, and I show up at basketball. These guys don't know. It may not look like it, but I can handle myself on a basketball court a little bit. There's about 20 guys there that night. We picked the 4 captains, and they start picking players. You know how it goes. Now, look, I wasn't a first-round draft pick. I get that. I wasn't second round, maybe even third round. But it got to the point in the draft where I started going, him? Her? But for me? And we get all the way to the last person I'm standing. You got to know, this is not a feeling that I've been accustomed to in my life. And I'm the last guy just standing on the line. And it's the pity pick. You go, well, no one else is going to take him. Come on over here, Scott. And I'm telling you, my pride was hurt. So I cannot believe the last pick. And as I was going home, it finally dawned on me, Scott, you have to look at it through their perspective. You're 5'7", overweight, wearing New Balances, and Mario and his friends are on your shirt. They don't see a basketball player there. You didn't look real appealing to them in that moment. You got to understand, because as humans, we look at the outside. And God goes, but I look at the inside. I am operating with a level of information that you do not have. He does know if that person is going to end up being crazy 5 years down the line. He already knows that. He knows that that's not the right house. He knows that that's not the right neighborhood. He knows that that's not the right job. He has all the information, which is why when it comes to making decisions, do not simply ask God's blessing on the back end. Ask him in on the front end so the way you make sure that you get it right. Because if there is somebody that has all the information and can see what you cannot see, he has to be part of the decision-making process. In fact, he has to be the one that makes the choice. You can't just go, okay, God, I'm taking this job, now I want you to bless it. The question has to become on the front end, God, is this the job for me? Is this the place for me? Is this the relationship for me? Is this the opportunity for me? We have to ask if that's the case. He has to be part of it. And here's why, because my guess is you've all met somebody, done life with somebody, that they made what looked like a no-brainer type decision. It was obvious to everybody what they were supposed to do, and they did it, and it went horribly. And you've had those conversations where you go, I never saw that coming. I'll tell you what, there is someone who did, but he wasn't part of the decision-making process. He saw it coming. So if he knows more than you, sees more than you, he's got to be part of the decision. He goes on, verse 8 says this, Then Jessie told his son Amminadab to step forward and walk in front of Samuel. But Samuel said, This is not the one the Lord has chosen. Next, Jessie summoned Shimea, but Samuel said, Neither is this the one that the Lord has chosen. In the same way, all 7 of Jesse's sons were presented to Samuel, but Samuel said to Jesse, The Lord has not chosen any of these. There's this parade of sons walking in front of Samuel. Samuel trying to discern which one the Lord is saying yes to. And as they keep passing by, it's no, no, no. I mean, he's hearing from the Lord in the moment. No, no, no. And it's like, wait a second, God, you said to come to Bethlehem, find a man named Jesse, and that one of his sons was going to be king. And all the sons that have been presented to me, they're gone. This is my guess is when we're trying to make decisions, we want to make a quick decision. And Samuel is rather than a quick decision having to wait on the Lord. We don't like that, do we? We don't want to have to wait on the Lord to hear the right thing, but I'm telling you, if you don't wait on the Lord, you might end up where you're not supposed to be. Or you might end up with who you're not supposed to be with. Or in a situation that was never meant for you if you don't want to wait on the Lord. I went through a season here at Southridge. I've told you all this many, many times where I was finished with ministry at Southridge. I was called to preach, and they already had a preacher. So everything on the outside, I'm looking at that. I go, I can't stay here. They got a preacher. God, you called me to preach. I got to go somewhere else. So I start filling out applications. I'm trying to get out of here. I go to an interview in Ohio. I think I absolutely nail it, which I probably did, but the Lord said no. Said no. And I came back, and I was hurt. And the whole time I was going, hey, if you had consulted me on this, I could have kept you from that hurt. I could have kept you from those feelings of insecurity that you went through now that you went and got yourself rejected, when that's not what I had for you. Tried to rush into it, and then the next thing so I told the Lord, I said, hey, I will pray and fast 40 days this summer. You tell me what I'm supposed to do. I messed it up too bad. Now I've been hurt. Now I'll do it the right. Isn't it funny? On the second chance, we always seem to add God in a little bit more. We're a little bit more cautious. So I pray and fast for 40 days. I'm fully expecting in that 40 days that God's going to go, listen, Scott, there's a magnificent church in this state. They're going to call you. The gates of heaven are just going to be open, and his blessing. And I keep thinking that's what's going to happen all 40 days. And for 40 days, the Lord says absolutely nothing. We get to day 40, praying again, fasting, and I go, God, what do you want for me and my family? He says, stay. I said, you call me to preach. You put me at a church that has a preacher. How can I do what you've asked me to do if I'm still there? You say stay. Maybe I heard you wrong. What did you really mean to say, God? Because I'm trying to get a different answer. Have any of you all ever figured out that a lot of times God's voice sounds just like yours? It does, don't it? It's like, wait a second, I don't think I heard you clearly the first time, God. Can we try that again until it sounds like what I wanted? And he comes back again, he goes, stay. God, I don't think you're hearing me. You called me to preach. I'm at a church that already has a preacher. We got to do something different, God. I think you'd be smart enough to know that. You know, you are God. Stay. All right. We'll stay. 2 weeks later from that prayer, I'm sitting in front of the elder board of Southridge Church to become the lead teaching pastor here. If I had rushed off, not prayed, not fasted, I wouldn't be here right now. Could God be blessing me somewhere else? Absolutely. But was this what he wanted all along? Absolutely. And so I get to be in the center of God's will because I didn't try to rush into a decision. Samuel's standing there, he's watching all the choices go by, and he's going, no, that's not. God says no, God says no. God. He gets to all 7 of them. Here's the crazy thing. He gets to all 7 of them. There's no more sons that are present. Could you imagine how confused Samuel would be? God, you said Jessie in Bethlehem, his sons, here's his sons. You said no. What's going on? Here's what I need you to know when it comes to these decision-making things. You need to trust God even when it looks like you're out of options. I'm telling you, I know that there are single guys and gals that you feel like you're out of options and you're about to rush into the wrong relationship. Because you feel like there's unemployed people that you're about to take a job that's not meant for you because you feel the pressure. Oh, I got to make a decision. No. Wait on the Lord. There's people, you're getting ready to make a decision that's going to drastically affect your church or drastically affect your family. That's not for you. Because on the outside, it's going to go, man, it looks right. No, listen, just wait. I've been doing ministry here in Charleston for 14 years. This is one of the most frustrating things about being a pastor in Charleston, West Virginia, is it's very difficult to pastor in a town where the population gets smaller every year. You're supposed to try to grow a church while everything around it is dying, and everyone in it is always moving away. It's difficult to grow a church in that sort of environment. But this is where God called me to do ministry. But it's always interesting to me as I work with, especially with the young adults in our church. I want to speak, if this is you, just listen. It's interesting to me that my story, and I know my story is not everyone's story, but my story, God says stay in a situation that didn't make any sense. But I've very rarely ever met a young adult that a new market was calling with more money that they didn't feel God calling them to. Ain't that funny? It's like every time someone in our congregation, we'll have a new young family, everything will be going good. They're so invested in the church 3 years later, Pittsburgh has more money. But is that where you're supposed to be? Well, I would love to know why God hasn't, or maybe he has and we haven't listened, told more people to stay. Fight it out. Stick where you're at. Plant some roots and stop chasing after your own dreams and see what God might do through a lifetime of faithfulness where you are. Sure, does God say go? Absolutely, God says go. But let's not act like he doesn't also say stay sometimes. It's just not what we want to hear. So we're always chasing that next big thing. We're always chasing that next new market. Ooh, my business will be more successful here. This company can offer me more jobs. That may be good and well. That may be the Lord's will. But make sure you ask him on the front end. Don't ask him to just bless the back end. Because here's what happens is when you're truly sold out to letting God decide, when you let him be in charge when decisions come up, that you'll get to points where you go, I don't know what's next. When you're all out of options. That had to be where Samuel's at. You're all out of options. Here's all 7 of the sons. Samuel has so much trust that he heard from the Lord that it would be one of Jesse's sons. His next question doesn't make any sense because I don't know about you, but this doesn't make sense to me. If I told you, man to man, man to woman, adult to adult, I said, hey, I'm having a dinner. I'd like you to invite all your kids. You show up at dinner. Do you have any idea what a ridiculous question it would be, unless I heard from the Lord if I went, is this all of them? That's a crazy question to ask somebody. Hey, bring all your kids. Brought all the kids. You go, just, on a whim here. You got any more? That's a crazy question. And that's exactly what Samuel asked in the next verse. Because he goes, God said no to all of them, but he said it was a son of Jesse, so there must be more options. There is more options than what you are able to see initially. If you will be faithful where you are, more options will present themselves. You guys know this. We know this. The grass is not always greener. Right? I tell you all this all the time. If you're trying to run away from someone, the problem with that whole plan, if you're always trying to get to the next new thing, because you're like, man, it stinks over here. I need something new. The problem is, for the most part, we are always our biggest issue, and everywhere that we go, we go. And we're trying to escape problems that we don't realize could be fixed if we would focus on fixing us, but we just smuggle our problems in and of ourselves to a new situation and create more dysfunction. You can't run away from it. So more options pop up. He goes, are these all the sons you have? He responds, no, they're still the youngest. He's out in the fields watching sheep and goats. Send for him at once. We will not sit down until he arrives. That's wild. He goes, oh, there is another one, but he is so insignificant. He is so, the youngest son was nothing. It was all about the oldest son. Nobody has plans for the youngest son. He's taking care of the sheep. He's inconsequential to the story. He didn't even get invited. How would you like that? Someone told your dad, bring all your kids, and you got left out. He goes, oh, I see where I'm at. I see how much I'm valued. But Samuel's so in tune with the Spirit and the decision-making process, he knows that there's somebody else. He knows that there is. It's the forgotten youngest. Here's what I'll tell you, is a lot of times, and when he shows up, when David shows up, God says in verse 12, he says, this is the one. Anoint him. Him? The youngest one? How many of you know that a lot of times the decisions God asks us to make no sense? I mean, they just, to everyone around you, like your family, your friends will be going, really? Really? You yes to that? That sounds crazy. Nobody does that. That's not conventional wisdom. Nobody does that. Nobody works it out when their marriage is on the rocks. Just divorce and start over. Nobody goes through the hard thing to actually fix it. Nobody does that. And the Lord's going, yes, what I'm calling you to, it's going to be difficult. And it may not make sense. Right? I'm telling you, when he said stay, I was like, what? You want me to preach? I can't preach here. I get to preach 6 times a year. I can't stay here. You stay. God, are you sure? It makes no sense. This is what happened. We started the For the Future Giving campaign last year. And the whole time I'm going, okay, God, I know that you want us to pay off this debt, but I don't know if you've noticed or not, but groceries are pretty expensive. I don't know if you've noticed this or not, but this is a church that has not actually made budget in more than a decade at least. You want them to raise an extra $1 million when they won't even give at the level that they vote every year that they'll give at? Really? God, it makes 0 sense. He goes, yeah, I want you to do it. And you know we've almost brought in $300,000 already on that campaign. It makes no sense whatsoever. That's sometimes how God operates. But here's the deal. When you're dealing with someone like God, like in any situation, the leader always has more information. Right? As parents, you ever had to make a choice as a parent and your kids don't understand it and they don't like it? but it's not really for them to know all the information. So you just have to go, I'm sorry, this is just how it is. You're just going to have to trust me. That happens all the time as a leader of anything, right? If you're a leader of a church, leader of a business, leader of a family, whatever, if you're in charge of people, sometimes you'll have to make choices that people will go, I don't like that. But they might not like it because they don't have all the information. That's what's going on, is if you'll trust your decision-making process to God, He sees more and knows more. He has all the information that you do not have to make the best decision. So you have to include Him in the process. I'm gonna share something just quickly with you. You'll hear more about this over the next month or so. We got a little bit of this, like God has been pointing in a direction for us as a church, me personally, that like doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Church time, like church goes in cycles. Like as you can tell by the amount of maroon seats that are not filled, summer is a pretty rough time in church because everyone goes on vacation, gets rested. But like fall is like growth time. Fall and spring, growth time. So that's when like we got small groups coming back. There's all this type of stuff. No pastor in their right mind would miss fall ever, right? They just wouldn't. That's too big of a time. But this is actually what's been going on in my life lately. Back in May, I went to Los Angeles to the Church of God National Convention. I was traveling with a buddy of mine, and he's that type of friend, and if you don't have a friend like this, you really need to get you a friend like this, that normally when he's talking to me, he wants to know how I'm doing, not really how the church is doing, but like how I'm doing. He's like trying to get into that area that like we don't like to let people into. And I find myself at 6 a.m. in the airport just kind of bearing my soul to him, going, if I'm being honest, I think I'm on my last leg. Ministry is killing me. The demands of being the lead pastor of a church, dealing with all the stuff that we have to do, the constant Sunday comes every 7 days. We have a staff of like 9 people I'm responsible for. I said, honestly, I don't know how much more I can take. So I'm on my last leg. He says, God, something you have to do something. You have to make a change. Something has to happen. So we go throughout the week. We end up at lunch with one of the national leaders of the Church of God, and I'm just planning on catching up with my friend, to be honest, and he starts poking and prodding in ways that only the Spirit could do. And he looks, he goes, Scott, I want to know how you're doing. I said, oh, gosh, I don't want to get into this with you, man. We sit there for an hour, and I tell him, I said, listen, I feel like I don't know how much more I've got in me. I don't know how much more I got in the tank to continue to do ministry at this level. And both of them, they said, well, Scott, when is the last time that you ever got any actual rest? And come to find out, here at Southridge, you're supposed to take time off like every 5 to 7 years in my position. During my time here, I took an extended 3-week vacation that the elders called a sabbatical, but my sabbatical is supposed to be 3 months long. But truthfully, there's never been a time in the church where I go, I don't know when we can do it. And we've identified this September as a month that I'm going to not really be on sabbatical because we're not going to do 3 months, but me and my family are going to step away for the month of September and just get some rest. And here's why. I was talking to one of my staff members a couple weeks ago, and they were asking for a Sunday off. They said, but I'm struggling with it because we have an event that day, and I really want to be at that event. Now, it's funny, like I can prescribe medicine to other people, but it's very hard for me to take it myself. And I told him, I said, what does it matter if that event's a success if you're not healthy for ministry the rest of the year? Or if you're out of ministry in 3 years, what's it matter? And it was kind of the same for me. What does it matter if this fall is a gigantic success if I don't get the rest that I need to lead this church for the future, where God's calling us to? So, long story short, month of September, people will be here preaching. This church is going to be rocking this fall. We'll have a bunch of our staff pastors. We're bringing in a couple of pastors to speak on special Sundays, but I won't be here. My family won't be here. I won't answer your text messages, your phone calls, your Facebook Messenger, emails, nothing until I get back. Thanks. And I think what you all are going to find out And this is part of that trusting God process, which is probably why I haven't taken the extended time off that I've needed, is what we're going to find out is that this church works not because of me, but because of God working through you. And that's what we'll find. That's what we'll find. I know people get antsy whenever the pastor's not around. Listen, you have a fantastic staff here, you have a fantastic elder board here, and you all are what make this church work through the power of the Spirit. So it makes no sense. I know the timing of it's like really September. That's when everyone's finally past Labor Day. And it's like, yeah, this is what God's asking us to do. And we have to make decisions for the long term rather than the short term. So when I tell you, I don't just get up here and be like, man, this would be a good idea to preach this. I'm preaching to you stuff that the Lord is forcing me to live out. First-hand experience that sometimes God calls us to things that make no sense. The timing won't make sense. The people won't make sense. There's all sorts of stuff that won't make sense. But this is how God operates. And the rest of the story goes, as you might suspect, David shows up, Samuel anoints him, and David is going to end up being the greatest king that Israel has ever had, except for the one who would come after him and sit on his throne forever. David ends up being the right king. Samuel makes the right decision, and here's why. Saul was not a good king because he would not submit himself to the leadership of the Lord. The reason why David is a good king is because he submitted himself. He was a man after God's own heart. He wanted God to be in charge. If you want to continue, what's going to happen is if you don't listen to what I'm saying today about putting God into the decision-making process, you're going to end up with a bunch of Sauls in your life and wonder why everything keeps breaking down, why this relationship, this relationship, this relationship, this job, this job, this job, this church, this house, this neighborhood, this state. Your whole life is going to be nothing but the bodies that you leave behind in your decision-making if you don't put God in on the front end so he can save you the pain and tell you what it is that you ought to be doing. Put him in at the front. Submit yourself to whatever he wants more than what you want. Put his will above your own will. Don't settle just for what you can see. Trust the voice of God in your life to lead you to the center of his will. Because here's what I found. I'll be starting December 1st, will be my 14th year in ministry. And here's what I've always known. It's not always been easy, but the center of God's will is always the best place to be. No matter if it hurts, no matter if other people don't understand, no matter if there's questions, no matter if there's consequences, the center of God's will is always the best place to be. That's what I want for you. That's why I'm begging you, put God into your decision-making process. The thing that I love most about David as king is he is fully submitted to God. And it's a picture of another king of Israel, fully submitted to God, Jesus of Nazareth, who in submission to the Father allowed the Romans to place him on a cross so he could bear the sins of the world and pay the penalty for your sins and free you from your sinful nature and make you a new creation. That's the king that David is always pointing towards, that greater king, King Jesus, who paid the penalty for your sins and paid so you could be released from the power of sin and be made new. Maybe you came in here and that's what you need today. You need to put someone else in charge. You need to be forgiven of your sins and made new. That's your prayer. Maybe you're in here and you walked in and you've got some decisions in front of you and your family that you're going, you walk in, you're going, I don't know what the right answer is. You can start the process of asking God right now. Maybe you have another need, whatever it might be. If you're on the other side of that camera and you need prayer, send us a message. But respond. Go seek the Lord. Seek his will for your life because it's the best place for you to be. It's a skill to kind of learn what God is saying, but the more you do it, the better you'll become at it, and it will safeguard you. If you're one of those people that the voice of God always sounds like your voice, what this does is this will protect you from you. That's what it'll do. If you need to pray, our prayer counselors will be up here, our altars will be open, the prayer room in the back.